Hi and welcome back. So in the previous video, we made the conclusion that the introduction of the openness in the goods market avails an additional decision to domestic consumers, and that decision is whether to buy domestic goods or to buy foreign goods. And we made the conclusion that central to the second decision is the price of domestic goods relative to the foreign goods, which we call it the real exchange rate. So we said the real exchange rate is not directly observable, and we will not find it published in any newspapers or newsletters. So what we do is to use the nominal exchange rate, which is found in the newspapers, and use it to compute the real exchange rate. So this is what we are basically going to do in this video. We're going to look at how we move from the nominal exchange rate to the real exchange rate. So the nominal exchange rate is defined as the price of a domestic currency in terms of the foreign currency. So it's denoted as the capital letter E there. So for instance, the E currently between South Africa and the dollar is $0.061, meaning that this is the amount of the US dollar required to purchase a one rand. So alternatively, we would say it is the price of foreign currency in terms of the domestic currency. So in that regard, we would say is the amount of money you use, the amount of rand you use to acquire a dollar, and in that case, it would be around 16 rand. So domestic currencies either appreciate or depreciate every day. So a currency is said to depreciate when it loses value, and to appreciate when it gains value. Therefore, an appreciation of a domestic currency means that is an increase in the E. So the real exchange rate depends on the nominal exchange rate, which is the E, and the domestic price of goods and services, and the foreign price of goods and services. So these three factors can be used to construct the real exchange rate. So how can we construct the real exchange rate between South Africa and the United States? So the real exchange rate refers to the price of a domestic goods in terms of the foreign goods. So to do so, suppose South Africa produces only one good, that is a VW sedan, and the US also produces one good, which is a Cadillac sedan. So to get the real exchange rate, we simply express both goods in terms of the same currency and then compute their relative prices. So the first step will be to take the price of the Volkswagen in South Africa, in South African rand, and convert it into the price of the United States in dollars. So assuming that the price of a VW sedan in South Africa is 360,000, and also assuming that currently the exchange rate between South Africa and US dollar is such that 1 rand acquires $0.0714. Therefore, the price of a VW in dollars will be equals to the 360 times the exchange rate, which will be $25,704. The second step will be to compute the ratio of the price of the Volkswagen in dollars to the price of the Cadillac in dollars. So if the price of the Cadillac is $30,000, then the price of a VW in terms of the Cadillac is equals to the ratio of the price of the VW and the price of the Cadillac. So that's supposed to be 30,000. So that's $25,704 divided by $30,000, which gives us 0.86. So the 0.86 or rather 86% tells us that a Volkswagen will be 86% the price of a Cadillac, or rather a Volkswagen will be 14% cheaper than a Cadillac, which is the difference between this and 1 or 100. 86% and 200%. So it means that it would be 14% cheaper. Volkswagen will be 14% cheaper than a Cadillac, or rather Volkswagen will be 90 or 86% the price of a Cadillac. So the example we just covered is pretty straightforward. But how do we generalize it? For instance, South Africa and the United States produce more than Volkswagen and Cadillacs. And we want to construct the real exchange rate that reflects the relative price of all the goods produced in South Africa in terms of all the goods produced in the United States. So the computation we just went through tells us how to proceed with the actual practical computation of the real exchange rate. So rather than using the price of a Cadillac and the price of a Volkswagen, we must use the price index for all goods produced in the United States and a price index for all the goods produced in South Africa. So this is exactly the GDP deflator we introduced in Macroeconomics 2 in Chapter 2. So they are, by definition, the price index for the set of final goods and services produced in the economy. So we let P be the GDP deflator for a domestic country, which is South Africa, and P star be the foreign deflator for US in this case. So the star will represent foreign, and E is the dollar nominal exchange rate, or rather is the rand dollar nominal exchange rate. So the first step will be to multiply the price of the South African goods in rands by the exchange rate, which is E. So the first step is to it's E times P. So exchange rate times the price, nominal exchange rate times the price of the domestic good. So because E is the price of rands in terms of dollars, it gives us this EP gives us the price of the South African goods in dollars because of the exchange rate factor in the E. So because the price of the US goods in dollars is given by P with a star, the real exchange rate, which is the price of the South African goods in terms of the US goods, which we shall call this symbol here, indicating or known as the epsilon in Greek lower cases, is given by this equation 18.1 here, which says the real exchange rate is the ratio between the price of the South African goods in dollars and the price of the US goods or foreign goods in its currency in dollars. So the real exchange rate is constructed by multiplying the domestic price level by the nominal exchange rate and then dividing it by the foreign price level. And these steps we just discussed are shown in this figure 18.4 here. It shows how we move from the price of the South African goods in rands up to the price of the South African goods in terms of the US goods on the other side, through the price of the South African goods in dollars, as well as the price of the US goods in dollars, which is the nominal exchange rate. Okay, so one factor to note here is that an important difference between the Volkswagen Cadillac example and this more general computation is that unlike the price of the Volkswagen in terms of the Cadillac, the real exchange rate is an index number. So this means that its level is uninformative alone. It is uninformative because the GDP deflator used to construct the real exchange rate are also index numbers themselves. So these numbers are basically equals to 1 or 100 in whatever year is chosen as the base year. All is not lost though, because although the level of the real exchange rate is uninformative, the rate of change of the real exchange rate is informative. So if, for example, the real exchange rate between South Africa and the United States increases by 10%, this tells us South African goods are now 10% more expensive relative to US goods than they were before. And just like nominal exchange rate, the real exchange rate move over time. So these changes are called real appreciation or real depreciation, where an increase in the relative price of the domestic goods is called the real appreciation, while a decrease in the relative price of a domestic good is called real depreciation. Okay, so let's take one last step before moving to openness in the financial market. So we have so far concentrated in the exchange rate between South Africa and the United States, but the United States is just one of many countries South Africa trades with. So this means that we have to make a distinction between two types of real exchange rate. So the bilateral real exchange rate, which is the exchange rate between the real exchange rate between two countries, just the one that we have just looked at, and multilateral real exchange rate, which is the weighted average of the real exchange rate against all other countries that the country trades with. So the principles we use to construct the multilateral exchange rate is quite simple, even if the details of constructing it are more complicated. So we want the weight of a given country to incorporate not only how much the country trades with South Africa, but also how much it competes with South Africa in other countries. So, for example, take two countries, South Africa and country A. So suppose South Africa and country A do not trade with each other. So trade share are equals to 0, but they are both exporting to another country, call it maybe country B. So the real exchange rate between South Africa and country A will matter very much in terms of how much South Africa exports to country B, and therefore to South African export performance. So the variable constructed in this way is called the multilateral real South African exchange rate. Okay, so we'll conclude the openness in the goods market here, and we'll start looking in the openness in the financial market in the next video. All right, thank you.